Welcome to episode 82 of the Ski Podcast, and thanks for joining us, listener. We've got lots of ski-related chat for you in this episode, including advice on how to stay safe on the mountain, what a rocker is, and interviews with not just one, but two British Olympic medal winners. Now, firstly, I'd like to thank Switzerland Tourism for sponsoring the podcast. I think emissions are a big topic right now with COP26 going on, so you might be interested in this activity I spotted this week in Andermatt, where this winter you can try e-quad biking. You can actually rent electric bikes by the hour, ride them on a special 3K track. So that's a great emissions-free activity. And to go along, if you happen to be in Andermatt, with ski touring, which is what I was doing when I was there last in March 2020, the day after the lifts closed. And I happen to travel by train as well. So if you want a really low-carbon trip, try going by train to Andermatt, ski touring, and go e-quad biking. Now, my name's Iain Martin. I'd like to introduce my guest today. Firstly, I'd like to start with Henry Schneewind from the eponymous Henry's Avalanche Talks. Hi, Henry. How are you?
Hi, Iain. Great. It's great to be here.
Excellent. And also joining us, we have Megan Hughes, Deputy Editor at InTheSnow magazine. Hi, Megan. How are you?
Hi, Iain. I'm well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, and you may have spotted that story, the e-quad biking, I pulled out of the most recent issue of InTheSnow magazine. So I do read them, honestly. Let's start by finding out when you skied or snowboarded last. Henry, when was that for you?
When I skied or snowboarded last was last April in the Val d'Isère area of France, of Savoie, France.
I'm guessing you were ski touring then, were you?
Well, I was just going to say yes, because the lifts weren't open in France for the entire season last season. So it was great getting lots of people into the ski touring side of things, but it was a rather slow season professionally and socially. That's for sure.
Yeah, a very, very different season. Well, we'll come on to how the forthcoming season is going to be looking. Megan, what about yourself? When were you last on snow?
It must have been summer, but it was the snow centre at Hemel Hempstead.
You'd be surprised by how many guests on the show their last skiing, was at Hemel or Chill Factory or one of the other indoor centres. What about actually in the outdoors on the mountain?
It would have been March 2020. I think my last trip pre-lockdowns was Whistler in Canada. Yeah, that was lovely. I'd not been before, and I sort of left and just thought, right, I actually really want to move here now. So,
right. Well, I mean, Henry, I'm guessing you're going to be going back to Val d'Isère for the start of the season. What about yourself, Megan? Do you have any trips lined up for this winter?
Yeah, actually, end of this month, so end of November, hoping to head out to Tyrol for sort of opening weekend at Ischgl, and also just traveling around some of the other areas. I think we'll be based in Innsbruck, so just getting a few different ski days in.
Great.
As early as possible, really.
You'll definitely be one of the first end of November. I mean, we are speaking as we are today on Thursday, the 4th of November. We've seen quite a bit of snow in the Alps over the last few days, and the snow line's getting lower, which is very exciting. So let's have a little think about, what is the travel situation going to be? Katie Crowe isn't able to join us today, so I'm going to run the Battle Face travel update. And the good news is the red list has been scrapped. Not that really affects skiing too much. Testing is minimal if you're vaccinated. It's now just a lateral flow test when you get back to the UK on day 2. And in most countries, really good news from this week is that the UK Covid Pass, your NHS pass, is now acceptable. So you don't have to worry about inconsistencies with EU countries. And I've also seen that also covers Switzerland now, because there was a little bit of debate as to whether you'd have to buy this Swiss Covid Pass, which is going to cost 30 Swiss francs. But I've read that the NHS pass will be covered for that as well. So those are all the really good things. The TBC undecided side of things is whether perhaps boosters, will be required for travel. We mentioned before that if you are one of the early people to get double vaccinated, countries like Austria have a limit of a year to be considered fully vaccinated. So that could be an issue. More of an issue is going to be the situation for non-vaccinated under 18s from the UK, because that will be all of them. and it looks like regular testing will be likely, but that's all still unclear at this stage, November. I think it will become more clear as we progress to the season. France is going to make some announcements on that in mid-November. And one really interesting development I saw this week, possibly controversial, in Canada, a number of resorts have decided that they're only going to let fully vaccinated skiers and snowboarders on the slopes. Now, I'm going to stick a link to that into the show notes. It's up in the Nikiska area. I don't have a lot of details about that. It seems quite surprising, perhaps a bit controversial, but we'll see if other resorts pick up on that as well. Now, we mentioned about snow. I do have a couple of snow reports this week. First is from Dave Burrows, regular contributor and presenter of the Ski Instructor podcast. His updates from Cervinia. It's a little while ago, so it came before the recent snow. And that's going to be followed by Simon Burgess. Regular listeners will remember his report from the Lake District in May in episode 61. And last week he was out in the Netherlands, and it may be the flattest country in Europe, but as you'll discover, has an excellent indoor slope there.
Hello Iain, it's Dave Burrows from SnowPros Ski School. I join you from the very top of the Saas-Fee Glacier here in Switzerland. I'm here with my colleague Mike, Magic Mike, who works SnowPros in Villa. What's the conditions like today, Mike?
It's beautiful. We've had a bit of an Indian summer here in this part of the Swiss Alps, and there's been very little cloud, so it's been quite sunny, but also at the top of the glacier it's been cold. So it's currently we're at 3,400 metres. It's about -10, it's quite chilly on the fingers. The snow is good though. The snow's really good high up. It's quite crisp, but packed in really well. It's beautiful to train and ski early season.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Like normally there's a few icy patches on the glacier, but actually, like today, it's just that really nice, soft, grippy sort of glacier snow that everyone's kind of looking for. It's good for skiing, isn't it?
Yeah, no, enjoying it, and like I say, there's not too busy at all. There's a couple of national race teams up here, but yeah, there's enough snow to go around, and fantastic conditions for this early in the season.
Yeah, we picked a really, really nice day for it as well. It looked cloudy to start with, and actually it's been it's sort of all burned away. So no, it's really good. So in short, Iain, October now. Late October conditions, Saas-Fee Glacier, absolutely amazing. And next week, for those who've got the Magic Pass, actually, that it opens up down to Morania at 2.5. And we saw them, didn't we, like preparing the piste down there. So that was pretty cool. Just a quick one, just for those that are interested. Just tell us what the sort of COVID protocols are on the lifts on the way up.
Okay, so there's masks on the lifts, on the two cable cars and of the train, so that's similar to all of Swiss public transport. But when you're on the drag lifts, obviously up in the open air, it's all people are keeping a little bit of distance, but all safe and spread out. And no lifts on the drags, but on the enclosed transport there are lifts. There are masks still.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, and there's no like COVID certificate or anything needed to access the ski lift, so it's pretty usual Swiss logic, like Swiss public transport, no passes, but obviously any leisure in the open air, which is what we are on the glacier, no masks, no passes required, so it's pretty logical. So Iain, keep up the great work with your podcast. We're loving your work, and from me and Magic Mike at the top of the Saas-Fee Glacier, see you later.
Have a good season. Speak soon.
Hi, it's Simon here, reporting from Landgraaf in Holland. Yes, this is a snow report from Europe's largest indoor snow dome. Conditions are much like you'd expect if you're used to riding at domes in the UK, but everything is on a much larger scale. The slopes are kept chilled to a brittle -4 degrees Celsius, and Landgraaf definitely feels colder than UK domes. There are 3 main runs, including a slope dedicated for freestyle with 2 additional learner slopes. The main chairlift is a relief running top to bottom, making the button lifts avoidable. The terrain park has jumps, boxes and rails of various sizes, enough to keep you entertained for a few hours of riding. The bars and restaurants at Landgraaf require you to present proof of COVID vaccinations to be able to gain access. However, it is noticeable that relevant documentation was not checked leaving or arriving through the airports. Overall, it feels great to be back on snow, albeit man-made, and being able to travel has brought with it a sense that this season may just run smoothly for skiers and snowboarders. For me, roll on December and my first trip to Switzerland. If you'd like to follow my travels in Switzerland this winter, head over to simonjackburgess.com, where you'll be able to find my latest posts and links to my YouTube channel.
Hello, this is Rob Rees on the ferry boat on the Avalanche Awareness in central Switzerland in Canton, Lucerne. I'm just heading towards Lucerne city centre, the beautiful site of Pilatus Mountain towering above the city, covered in snow after quite extensive snow on Monday and Wednesday here. As a result, Andermatt has opened for skiing as of last weekend, and there's been some fresh snow on the Gemstock, so some very good steep skiing to be had there. Obviously the glacier at Engelberg, the Titlis Glacier, is already open, and the Berner Oberland, the Jungfrau region, Muren in particular, is opening this coming weekend. If you're going further afield in Graubünden, the Diervaletzer Glacier is already open, and that will give you some pretty good skiing. That's where the Swiss ski team trains, and they were training there for the 2 weeks prior to Seoul. So there's plenty of snow there. That's on the Bernina Pass, and there's plenty of accommodation at this time of year in that part of Switzerland. Over and out.
Well, thanks to Dave, who was obviously in Saas-Fee and not Chevinia. Also to Simon out in Landgraf in Holland, and Rob Rees with his first snow report for the ski podcast out in Switzerland. Listener, we always welcome snow reports. If you'd like to contribute, then please email me your audio clip to theskipodcast@gmail.com. It's a shame we haven't got a snow report of the last couple of days, but I think we've all seen images on social media. Henry, you were saying to me earlier in the green room, you've seen a couple of photos this week. Yep.
Even just yesterday, November 3rd, people wading around, maybe not quite up to their knees, but sort of 1,800 meters in the northern French Alps, wading around between ankle and knee level in snow.
Yeah, that's very encouraging. And I shared a photo of Latania this morning, which I think off memory is 1,400 meters. And they snow down to there in the all the way down to the nursery slopes in the centre of town. Megan, you've been sharing some pictures of good snow?
Yeah, I saw some interesting ones actually yesterday from Le Menuire in the Three Valleys. And their caption was quite funny because they'd obviously gone to sleep and everything was orange and autumnal and there were leaves on trees and things. And then they woke up and it was completely white down to the resort level. So I think they were quite shocked, but also obviously very happy about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's when you get this kind of, I would say early, autumn snow, although we're in November, it is technically winter now. And sometimes it comes down and it disappears straight away. But what seems to be encouraging is that the temperature is staying low. And so, it's a starter of a base. And, places like, Val Thorens, just up the road from Les Menuires, is due to open on the 20th of November. Henry, you're going to be in Val d'Isère. I think that opens the weekend after, the sort of 28th, 29th of November. Right. So, fingers crossed that it stays cold and we get a really good start to the season, because I think everybody wants that. Now, definitely. Henry, I'm going to come back to you. I mentioned in the lead-in, the introduction there, that you are the creator of Henry's Avalanche Talks, and there's a kind of clue in the title there as to what you do. But I wondered if you wanted to give us a little bit of a background about what Henry's Avalanche Talks or HAT is.
Well, I started Henry's Avalanche Talk in the late sort of 1980s. I didn't know it was called Henry's Avalanche Talk at the time. I was just doing Avalanche Talks. And what led to that was that I come from the Boston area of America, and I grew up as a junior racer in Vermont, and I got to a very high standard of skiing. And when I retired from ski racing at the ripe old age of 15, so when I came over to do a gap year in France, I had a high standard of skiing, but no mountain knowledge whatsoever. So when I discovered the off-piste for the first time, because in New England, there's not a lot of really off-piste, lots of ice. So I discovered for the first time the vast expanses of the Alps and deep snow, and I thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever come across. So I was ripping it up all over the place, having the time of my life. And of course, I was a perfect candidate to be an avalanche victim. So it wasn't very long before I triggered an avalanche, and I was very lucky not to be caught up in it. And so that sort of set the tone for the rest of my life. I did a degree in avalanche forecasting. And,
right. Sorry, can I just quickly ask, where were you then when you were first skiing where that avalanche went off?
I just ended up by chance in Val d'Isère. I'd never really heard of it before. You know, America, we have the biggest and best in the world, so no need to know about places elsewhere. But I discovered very quickly that the biggest ski areas in the world are actually in the Alps.
What a great resort to stumble across. And sorry, I interrupted you before. You mentioned that you did a degree in avalanches?
I did a degree. I specialized in avalanche forecasting at Montana State University and Boston University, and that was part of a geology degree that I did in those two places. And that was after I did my gap year, so I was able to rip myself away from this fantastic thing that I discovered, off-piste skiing and touring. But it did set the theme for the rest of my life, and my my specialization in studies at Boston State University, which was avalanche forecasting as part of geology degree.
So I can see you had the academic background and practical experience from being on the mountain. How did that end up becoming teaching and sharing that with other people?
It's a very good question, because I did intend to do a master's degree, PhD, in studying snow and snow metamorphosis. And actually, the theme of my my research that I did was called the evolution of the snowpack, and in relation to weather events. So weather events and the evolution of the snowpack. What kinds of weather create unstable snowpacks? What kinds of weather events create stable snowpacks? So I was going to continue doing that, and was looking at universities in Grenoble in France when I came back over after my very close call with an avalanche. But then I discovered that in the not just the Val d'Isère teen area, but all throughout the Alps, people were dying in avalanches for the most simple, basic reasons, or even with the most simple and basic knowledge about accident reduction, they could have avoided a steep slope above a cliff or a steep slope above a massive hole that buried them under 2 or 3 meters. So I realized there's a big gap between the theory of avalanches and also avalanche awareness in terms of reducing the chance of being caught in an avalanche and injured or killed. So at that point in the late 80s, embarked on avalanche awareness, and that started up in Val d'Isère, and it's continuing on now.
You mentioned that you do these talks in Val d'Isère. What kind of format does it take then?
Well, it started in Val d'Isère, but then it spread out all through the Alps, and continuing on through a traditional UK tour that I'm kicking off next week in London, Covent Garden at the Ellis Brigham store there on Tuesday the 9th. And this is our annual tour that we've been doing for well over 10 years, except for last year, of course. And the format it takes is, there's an essentials talk, which are the essential things that you need to know about how to be safe out on the mountain in terms of avalanches. There are other dangers, crevasses and unglaciated area and falling and sliding. But the major risk out there for off-piste and touring is avalanches. So I cover the key points in an accident reduction framework kind of approach in the essentials, and then I have some in-depth talks as well on the science behind triggering and some other in-depth talks. But the really key stuff is in the essentials, because when we look at victims and the facts behind avalanches, it was victims of avalanches were not applying the basic things that you learn in basic avalanche education.
And we talk about basic avalanche education. I know that one of the things that you focus on, and I think everyone should focus on, is it's fine having a transceiver, but you have to know how to use it. And many people just strap a transceiver on and assume that means they're safe. And it can make it easier for you to be found, but it's no use at all if you don't know how to use it to be able to recover someone else.
Exactly. And what I say is that it's science, learning how to use it, not rocket science, learning how to use a transceiver. And in fact, with the evolution of the technology from analog to digital in the last 10, 15 years, it's much easier to find a buried victim. And we offer avalanche transceiver training in the UK and some great environments too, like Sandbanks Beach various different beaches around the UK, as well as Wimbledon Common and up in Manchester, and some similar types of environments. And what that allows you to do is get the basic training, at least for searching for a transceiver, and not have to put that time in, take that time away from your skiing on the mountain. Of course, there's digging, probing, and digging in the snow that you need to follow up on snow as well. But we're starting with the equipment and the training, Iain. So I'll finish that off, but I'll get to the really important part of it, which is prevention, because the best rescue technique is preventing the avalanche accident in the first place. And since most people trigger the avalanche themselves, that is something that can be done, and is the most important thing to focus on. But so transceiver, avalanche transceiver, shovel, and probe are the most important pieces of equipment to have, and you have to have all of them in order to get someone out from underneath the snow in 15 minutes or less, which we call a companion search and rescue, or self-contained search and rescue. Most people, the vast majority of people, are alive once if they're taken in an avalanche and buried. Most of them are alive for the first few minutes at least. After 15 minutes, about 70 to 80% of people are actually alive. That's after the first 15 minutes. After 30 minutes, there's only about 40 to 45% of people are alive. Why is that? Because most people die from suffocating underneath the snow, and it happens really quickly. You can't rely on an organized rescue to get you out from underneath the snow. So you need to everybody has to have this kit and transceiver, shovel, and probe, and know how to use it. And there's probing techniques as well, and shoveling techniques. Not rocket science, but you need to take the time, just a few hours to learn the basics on how to use it.
Yeah, I mean, the equipment is evidently vital to have with you. But you're talking about, accident prevention being the best risk strategy. In terms of that, you're trying to give people a greater awareness. For example, you mentioned before that people were skiing on pieces off-piste that followed onto a cliff or followed onto a dip where snow could pile up, presenting a danger, getting people to be more mindful of those elements.
Yes, and what I encourage people to do is first look at the facts around what the problem is in terms of accidents, get to know what the problem is, and then you can seek to come up with the solutions or solve the problem. So first of all, in avalanche accidents, over 90%, over 9 out of 10 people, so sort of 95% of all people who are caught in an avalanche trigger it themselves. And 9 times out of 10 or more, it's what we call a slab avalanche that's involved, a cold, dry slab avalanche. And then also around in the accidents, as I mentioned before, it's 15 minutes to live, basically, if you're caught and buried. So that 95% of people who are victims of avalanches actually having triggered the avalanche themselves really points to the fact that it's us who are the triggers, and it's sort of in many ways the biggest danger is ourselves. And other pieces of facts around it too are that most accidents happen in December, January, and February, and on north sides of the mountain, contrary to the myths about accidents happening on the south side of the slopes and in springtime.
Right. Okay. I mean, that's interesting as well. That's one of the perhaps a myth that you've debunked there. In my mind, I kind of anecdotally think that there are more fatalities from avalanches in Val d'Isère than other resorts relatively. I'm wondering if firstly that's true, and secondly if it's to do with the fact that there's more accessible steep terrain there, or maybe more younger people who are less good at judging risk taking on those slopes.
Val d'Isère is certainly probably one of the best ski areas in the world for off-piste and off-piste skiing and touring, or free touring, which a lot of people refer to as the combination of taking lifts off-piste and also touring anywhere from 15 minutes to several hours, using the combinations of the lift systems and the vast, really beautiful area. But Val d'Isère also has a very prominent name, especially in the UK. So that may be where you're getting to that conclusion. It's actually In France, it's the whole department of Savoie and Haute-Savoie that tend to have the most accidents. And that's because of, the great terrain and just the huge, the volumes of people and the great expanses there. And perhaps the steep slopes too, because avalanches release on steep slopes. And that's another piece of fact that people need to be aware of, the types of points that actually lead to accident reduction rather than just a myth that can be quite dangerous.
Yeah, well, we really are just, skirting around this topic, because I think your talks normally cover about 90 minutes or so. So I think maybe, anyone who wants to take this further, regular listeners will remember we've also had a How to Become a Piste special with Tom Greenall. We covered in that some of the avalanche training he did. We had Caroline Elliott on, who talked about avalanche rescue dogs, and you can just search through the website and you'll find all of these. And we did an avalanche special with Jim and Dave Burrows before. But if you'd like to find out more, Henry, remind me what your website address is.
Henry's Avalanche Talk. If you put in Henry and Avalanche onto your favorite search engine, it'll come right up. And our motto is safety is freedom, and because that's our vision of the mountains. It's to make safety an empowering force and leading to more freedom, opening the door to more adventure and more enjoyment, more success out on the mountain, thanks to knowing the true, knowledgeable and informed points that lead to accident reduction that you can apply to get the most out of your time on the mountain. And that's us, Henry's Avalanche Talk, where safety is freedom.
Okay, well, that's great, Henry. Thank you very much for that. And, it's a topic that always attracts a lot of attention. Most people don't necessarily give it as much attention as they should do. I'd like to move on to you, Megan, now, if I could. And this is your second appearance on the show. I didn't actually look up to see when the first one was. But, in the meantime, I think InTheSnow, the magazine and the website, made it through the pandemic, despite the whole Saison Blanche we had last year. Can I ask, was it tough getting through that period in terms of the business, the magazine, etc.? How did you get through it as a business?
Well, obviously it was quite a tough 18 months or so, as it was for everyone, really. Definitely wasn't a normal year for us and for the industry as a whole, of course. I do think, we had to batten down the hatches a little bit, as did sort of every company. But in a way, I think we were almost in quite a lucky position because, we're quite a good sized company. We're not a huge company. So it meant that we can be quite agile and respond quite quickly in situations like this, where we do have to be quite flexible and change things sort of as and when, really. So, I think we had quite a privileged position in that respect. But I will say what was probably the most tough part about it was just seeing the industry as a whole and the impact it was having on everyone. It wasn't easy for any of us to sort of just sit back and watch as the season didn't happen. And then, businesses started to struggle. And it was just, as mountain lovers ourselves, obviously we all wanted to be out there. I mean, Henry, you're very lucky that you were in the mountains, but yes. For the rest of us, we were kind of watching the snowfalls and thinking like, oh gosh, what I would do to be there. But obviously the resorts won't open anyway. But yeah, it was just, that was probably the most tough thing about it.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned before to you in the green room before we went live that doing the podcast last winter was great for me because, like yourself, I missed out on the mountains. And it was so good to be able to have guests on the show who were out there and enjoying it, although making us insanely jealous. And because it was a very good snow season last year, talking about some of the deep snow. But what I found really interesting, and I wonder if you kind of felt this through, engagement with social media or with users, is that a lot of people contacted me, listeners to the show, saying, oh, thanks for, keeping us in contact with the skiing world, through the winter. Did you find that at all when you were putting out content through last winter?
We did. But I do think there were kind of two distinct camps last winter, where there were the half that were wanting to see what was happening and just wanting the inspiration and thinking about next year and all that. And then there were the half that were kind of saying, stop showing us this. It's just making us upset. It's just making me depressed. I don't want to see it. So I do think, it was finding the balance between the two, obviously trying not to make people too upset that they weren't there, but whilst also keeping the mountain spirit alive, obviously, for this year.
Yeah, and I mean, did you ever run out of things to write about, given there was less going on in ski resorts?
We never ran out of things to write about at all. I think there was definitely a bit of a focus shift, though, as it wasn't what we would normally be writing about in the season. But, it was more sort of unique stories, snowfalls, and a lot, obviously, of pandemic news. We created basically an entire new online microsite that was just what's happening in resorts, what's happening with travel, what's, ABC of COVID-19 with skiing, really. But yeah, I wouldn't say we ever ran out of things to talk about. It was just definitely a bit of a focus shift from normal.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to hopefully change that conversation. I know we're having the update in every podcast about, what the story is in relation to traveling. But I'm very much hoping that within the next month or so, we're actually going to start talking about people going on their holidays and going skiing in a relatively normal way. And that will be very exciting when we come around to that, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I do think, like you mentioned earlier, there was a bit of a shift towards online and social media a lot more. The print magazine kind of wasn't our focus last year. It was more just getting the news to people across the platforms that they will actually be using at that point. Obviously everyone being locked down in their homes. And so that gave us, as I said, we were in quite a lucky position where we've always made our online, presence a big priority, especially in the last 5-6 years. So, we have the website, which we're constantly updating and making better. We've got a lot of followers on social media, on our Facebook, our Instagram. And we've now got the YouTube show, which we carried on during lockdown virtually, which was quite an experience. But I think all that kind of stood us in very good stead because that's where people were spending their time, was online.
I contribute to InTheSnow, most winters.
Yeah.
And, I find it when I do a snow report from wherever I am, I actually really enjoy the fact that the reach is so good. I'm actually doing a video and a whole bunch, thousands of people are looking at it. And that's quite validating. It makes me think, well, it's worth all of this time that I'm putting in, which is great. What about, this winter? Are you seeing any trends this year in terms of, features or how advertisers are feeling? Are they feeling confident?
Yeah, I mean, on the confidence thing, it's been a really interesting one because obviously during the sort of the darkest months of the pandemic, it was like we weren't even having those conversations. That was something for another time. It was more just keeping in touch on a personal level. But I would say in the past few weeks, there has been such a turnaround in terms of confidence and, advertising interest because I don't know, I think if you'd asked any of us about 6 to 8 weeks ago, we would have probably been a lot less positive than we are now about this season actually happening. So yeah, that's been quite unexpected. It's been such a drastic shift recently. But obviously that's very good because it means people are booking, people have the confidence that they're actually going to get away, and that's always a good sign. In terms of trends on features, it is really interesting because people have obviously started thinking quite differently since lockdowns and pandemics and all this. And even though sustainability was a growing interest in that before the pandemic, there's definitely been a marked increase in sort of traffic to the pages of our site that are about train travel or driving to the Alps or sustainable ski gear, or even, if you would have seen in the magazine, we had a whole feature on skiing as a new vegetarian. Things like that are definitely, that's what's getting the most engagement, there's a conversation around it, really, I think, because people's priorities have changed somewhat. Yeah,
I mean, well, that's really encouraging to hear. And it backs up other kind of surveys. I may have referred to it before. I've certainly tweeted about it, that the Mountain Trade Network did a survey a while ago where they're tracking people's interest in sustainability, and it's been increasing, as you say, during that period. And I think that part of that is throughout lockdown, people perhaps have begun to appreciate nature more, and people saw how carbon emissions dropped, maybe pollution dropped, etc., and it's made them more interested in the environment. And it's a big topic at the moment because of COP26 going on, and people are becoming, if not more conscious of what is required to make those changes. So that is really encouraging. And you mentioned about the positivity from advertisers. In the last episode, we ran quite a lot of interviews with people from the Birmingham show, and that was really positive. I know that Dom, publisher of InTheSnow magazine, was there, and he was very positive about the number of people passing through.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I got up there on the Sunday, and I was actually quite pleasantly surprised by how busy and buzzing it was, really. I didn't obviously know massively what to expect because it's not been happened before, but yeah, it was just great. And the conversations we were actually having with skiers on the ground were again very positive, because obviously sometimes it can be quite difficult when the only conversations you're having are with other ski companies and advertisers and things. You're not entirely sure that you're getting the exact truth of what's happening with skiers' minds on the ground, but being able to talk to them at the snow show, everyone just seemed so enthusiastic to get out there this winter. I think I've never really seen an atmosphere like it, in the sense of I feel like everyone's just going to be appreciating it so much more this year.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's self-selecting to a certain degree, because the sort of people who would make the effort to go along to a ski show are probably the keenest, and therefore they are going to be the ones who are most likely to ski. But anecdotally, I mentioned it before, I moderated a couple of the sessions, and I got the audience to stick their hands up if they were planning to take a holiday, if they're planning to take more than one holiday. And, it was very, very encouraging. Well, that's great, Megan. Thanks very much for that. That's good, insight into that side of things. We mentioned the Birmingham show there. So actually, I did mention I did a few interviews with people. A couple of listeners have asked if we're going to be publishing the Ski Podcast Live session that we had. And I'm sorry to say you had to be there for that one, because the acoustics in the hall meant it just wasn't possible. But one interview I didn't run in the last episode was with Olympic medal winner Billy Morgan, who won the bronze medal in the big air in PyeongChang. So let's have a listen to that. Great, so I'm here at the National Snow Show with Billy Morgan. You're here on the Greystone stand, right?
Yeah,
there's amazing facility.
Just because the mini ramp's here.
Right, will you be on it yourself?
Yeah, a little go this morning.
Yeah, I just saw some guys doing skateboarding demonstrations, and this is a complex in Manchester, isn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Have you trained there before?
Yeah, I've been up there quite a lot. I'm an ambassador of theirs. An amazing facility, and they're still growing. They're just putting a climbing wall in upstairs, so they've got trampolines, big gymnastic floor space, big jump into foam pits, big skate park, mezzanine upstairs with coffees and stuff.
Yeah, so for the British team, this kind of feature is really useful,
good,
right?
Yeah, it's a good place to go and do free sports. I mean, we're definitely lacking that in this country, and they're leading the charge on.
Yeah. Actually, I went out last year to Cromontana. I went to a place called Alaya Chalet. Do you know that place at all? It feels like they've almost modelled it on this.
Really?
They've got a pump track skateboarding outside, and a skateboarding area, and the indoor thing as well. But there's a trampoline here as well.
Yeah.
Did you do a bunch of trampolining? Because you did gymnastics back in the past,
yeah,
right?
I did a little bit of gymnastics when I was really young, and then I quickly jumped into sports acro. So I did acro for about 8 years.
Right.
Till I was 14, and then quit, and then kind of slowly transitioned into snowboarding somehow.
Right, and how did that segue into snowboarding work out?
I went skiing with school, and they, went and did my ski lessons, and then saw the cool borders coming down the slope, and was like, that's a bit of me, that, and I want to go at that. So I went with my friend, and yeah, hooked. Kind of just really enjoyed the snowboard scene, everybody having fun at the dry slope. And then went away and started doing winter seasons, and then it all kind of spiraled out of control.
Where were you doing those seasons?
In Morsey, yeah.
Right, okay. Yeah. Were you working for a tour operator?
No, I saved up as much as I could all summer and did the season as cheaply as possible, so I didn't have to work.
So you're using, they have a big pipe in Avoriaz, were you up there?
Did have a pipe. I was in it very rarely,
right.
Which I should have been, but I just jumps too much,
Okay. Because big air kind of became your speciality,
that's
right?
Thing, yeah.
And there can't be many places where you can practice that.
Well, there is now.
Yeah,
there's enough places with big jumps about, especially when the season gets going.
And airbags, there are many more of those now,
we've got one in Livigno. So we've kind of partnered with the Italian national team, and we've got we took our big airbag out there that we use to train on. It's a landing bag rather than just like your bog standard airbag.
Yeah. And you've retired from competitive snowboarding now.
And you know what? I've been watching the videos recently, and I'm bloody glad I have, to be honest.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the kids. I thought, they've been saying it for generations. We don't know how much further snowboarding can go. We must be reaching the limits. It's still going mental. The kids are doing like loads and loads of different 1800s now. It's just standard, which just blows my mind.
Okay.
When I did that quad back in 2016, it was the first ever one, and I was like, that was so mental. I can't imagine lots of people doing it now as standard.
Yeah. And I guess, for your sport then, by my standards, you're pretty young, but by your sport, you're a bit older.
I'm a coffin dodger now.
You've packed a lot into your life already. And in fact, I can just see next to us, we've got some copies of your autobiography, Drop In,
yeah,
right?
It's a biography, right?
Right.
If somebody else writes it,
someone else writes it, it's a biography. Yeah.
I can't read or write, so it's a biography.
Right, but it basically covers, the whole of that Olympic journey and everything leading up to it and beyond.
From my, growing up in my birth in Southampton to growing up on the dry slope, enjoying the season air life, all the fun that came along with that, and then joining the team and you're just, my kind of path from the dry slope to getting an Olympic medal. It took me a while to realise that it's a story that people would want to read about. Writing a book about yourself is quite a strange thing to do, but I think now I've finished it, it's a good story.
Well, I think to me it sounds like a good story. There are very, very few British people who've won any sort of medal at the Winter Olympics, but to win it as an alpine athlete as well is pretty impressive.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Billy. Thanks very much, and I'll put a link to the book in the show notes.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, I mentioned his book. I received my copy earlier this week, so I will review it, but I'm really enjoying it, so far. And the really good news is that we've got a spare copy that I'm going to give away as a prize. So if you'd like to win a copy of Billy Morgan's biography called Drop In, all you have to do to go into the draw is to tell us why you listen to the Ski Podcast. You can enter on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. You just need to make sure that you tag the Ski Podcast, or by dropping me an email to theskipodcast@gmail.com, and I'll pick a winner at the end of November. So that was Billy Morgan. Yesterday, I was joined by Al Morgan from Ski Kit Info for our regular equipment update. The question I wanted to tackle, and that lots of people might have heard of, but not necessarily understand, is what on earth is a rocker? So I asked Al if he could explain to the layman, which is me, what a rocker is. Great. So I'm joined today by Al Morgan from Ski Kit Info. He's our resident equipment expert. And today I've got a question for you, Al. I saw a lot of this at the Birmingham show. Lots of skis out there talk about rockers. Now, can you tell me from a layman's point of view, what is a rocker?
Absolutely. Rocker's not something new, but it's something that's not necessarily understood as well as it could be. So if we think,
it's certainly not understood by me, which is why I'm asking the question.
Yeah. So if we think about a normal ski, a traditional ski, put one ski on the ground, just like on the flat ground. The middle of the ski under where you stand on it, which is where the binding is, will be off the ground, and the front and back will be on the ground. And they're generally the widest part of the skis that are on the ground as well. So that is called camber. It's got lots of different names: standard camber, traditional camber, positive camber. It's camber. And then when we're going to talk about other things, all skis have this little lift at the front in the shovel where it rises. When we're talking about rise through the front after this point, we're not talking about that shovel, okay? So that's just, so the normal ski, you've got to sweep at the front for the shovel and then camber underfoot, and the tip and tail of the ski are on the floor. When you stand on the ski, your weight then flattens that out. And what that does on hard snow, it exerts a more even pressure along the whole edge of the ski, so you get really good grip. Just the way that works when it spreads out, it's evenly distributing the pressure, so more grip, which is what you want for hard snow. Now, things get more complicated when we go into softer snow because we don't want all of that edge grip. And that's originally where this term rocker comes from. So if you imagine a rocking chair or a kid's rocking horse, it's got runners that it sits on, and when you rest there on the flat ground, the middle is on the ground and the front and back are raised off the ground.
Okay, I'm certainly I'm with you so far.
Great.
You're leading to us. This is an innovation to do with wanting to go off piste and develop.
Originally, absolutely. So quite a while ago, so turn of the century, it sounds so old, doesn't it? So around about 2002, then this shaping of the ski came about. There was a chap called Shane McConkey, who was an amazing skier and kind of revolutionized ski design when we're talking about rocker. So if you want to float in soft snow, you don't necessarily want all that pressure through the edge of the ski, through the ends of the ski, through the front and the back. You actually want it to be different. You want the ski to lift up in that softer snow. And this is essentially what that full rockered shape, like the bottom of the rocking horse or the rocking chair, does. Now, it's not as pronounced in skis, but a full rockered ski put on the flat on the ground would be touching under where the foot is, and the tip and the tail of the ski would be off the ground. That's full rockered. It gets called reverse camber as well, and different names, but essentially that's the rockered profile. So you imagine hooning in deep, soft powder snow on a fat ski where it's lifted at the front and back. The ski's going to be really easy to maneuver, nice and floaty, playful, happy days, brilliant. But we don't all have pure powder days, and we don't all have brilliantly groomed, perfect pistes where we want a standard camber ski. And that's where the vast majority of skis now in their shaping sit between those two extremes.
So does that mean that rocker skis are much more likely to be all mountain skis then?
Originally it was for powder, and then we saw it come into all mountain skis. So when we're talking about all mountain, we mean skis that are going to ski well on firm snow and make it easier to ski in soft snow. Then you start to go into free ride, which is more powder, or powder skis, some people call free ride skis. So if we stay just with the powder skis, you do get some that have that standard camber underfoot, and then they might have a rise through the shovel. Again, we call this rocker, that would be called tip rocker, right through. Before this really sharp sweep in the shovel, if the ski's lifted off the ground when you put it down, then that's rocker. It also gets called early rise. They're interchangeable terms. And that helps the ski to float up in soft snow, but also in those really challenging, crusty, kind of refrozen snow that you might get in the spring. That kind of shape can help hugely. And you can combine that with rocker in the back, so where the back of the ski is lifted up slightly, and then it helps to release out the turn, and it can make them really maneuverable, a lot of fun, but you still get those benefits of having grip underfoot.
So are there any skiers that it wouldn't be suitable for? Assuming you're taking on that terrain, is it better for a certain type of skier or not? Or if you want to take on that type of terrain, it's definitely going to be to your advantage?
It's very hard now to actually get a ski that doesn't have it for that kind of terrain. So it almost answers itself. It's proven itself so useful and beneficial in that kind of skiing. Almost all freeride skis have some kind of lift through the front. Most of them will have it at both the front and the back. And the other benefit when you're skiing in soft snow, you want a bigger footprint to stand on so you don't sink. And if you've got rocker, there's less what we call effective edge, so less bits trying to grab the snow, because that bit of the ski where just the standard camber is shorter, so it makes it easier to maneuver the ski. But you mentioned all mountain skis. Since it was originally kind of brought about for powder skiing, it's come into all mountain skis, and so it does benefit that because you get the benefit for the soft snow. But on piste, what we then found with rocker is, you imagine you're on a ski, you tip it on its edge, you make a turn shape, so that whole ski is bending in an arc. So the whole ski is essentially in a rockered shape. Now, if you just start that for the skier, so you give that little bit of rise at the front, it starts to turn for them. So we saw it not just in all mountain skis, but start to come into piste skis. And then we got some really strong performing piste skis that had rocker tip and tail, and they were incredible because they weren't grabby. They had that little bit of forgiving nature front and back, but you had this really strong camber underfoot, and it was incredible. I even had stories from race departments in brands where their racers were getting skis, putting them in door frames and bending them to put a bit of rocker in the tip of them. So it does work.
Does that work?
Well, I mean, this is when it wasn't being brought into race skis. And if we look at some race product now, the majority of World Cup and FIS race skis don't have rocker. But for a lot of the race skis that you can buy for recreational skiing, these full-on, full-performance piste skiing skis, they do have rocker at the front, and a number of them have it front and back, and
Right.
it works superbly well.
Okay, but we don't recommend to our listeners that they jam their skis in the door to try and create their own rocker, right?
No, unless you're being given 20 or 30 pairs of skis from a brand every winter because you are that good. No, don't go shoving your skis in a door frame and bending them.
Cool. That's really interesting. You mentioned Shane McConkey. I've got to mention at this point, listener, if you're interested to hear more about this, there's a ski podcast special interview I did with Tony McWilliam, who's the founder of Faction Skis, and he got to know Shane McConkey pretty well in that era, and he was extremely influential in the design of the Faction Skis that Tony came up with at that time. That's really interesting. Al, will you be able to join us again in a couple of weeks' time?
I would love to.
Megan, did you know what a rocker was, or do you know what a rocker is?
Yeah, I mean, we've filmed quite a few videos at various ski tests over the years, on the difference between a rocker and a camber kind of thing, just because it's one of those things that you think you know, but then actually you're not entirely sure.
Well, that's good. That makes me slightly better, because I feel like, and Henry, I'm sure you know what a rocker is.
I spend so much of my time on the snow and avalanche side of things and the safety aspects that on the ski technology, I just basically do what I'm told or listen to the experts. But I know what the effect is, and it helps to pivot the ski a lot more in powder. That's for sure.
Let's go back to the Olympics. I interviewed Billy Morgan, Olympic medal winner, and I did say to you in the intro that it's not just one Olympic medal winner in this week's episode, as I was lucky enough recently to interview Izzy and Zoe Atkin. Now, Izzy won the Olympic bronze in the slopestyle at PyeongChang, and she's going to be joined at Beijing by her younger sister Zoe, who's competing in the big air. I'm going to publish a special episode with the full interview, but for now, here's a little snippet of our conversation. And you've been on the British programme, from a very young age. I know Pat Sharples pretty well from, a long way back when we were both in Courchevel together. And in fact, I've interviewed him for the ski podcast before. I understand he was sort of quite influential in you coming towards the British team. Is that right, Izzy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was definitely a key figure. I have dual citizenship and close family ties in the UK, so it was already something I was thinking about. And then, my dad and I remember we had a meeting with Pat Sharples and just came away from that meeting with such a positive impression of him and the team. And that was played a big role in my decision.
And I read somewhere that you were brought up on a diet of Ribena and Marmite. So not many people have Marmite in their lives unless they got a British connection.
Yes.
So in the Marmite test, some people say you either love it or you hate it. And which side are you falling on then, Zoe?
Oh, love it for sure. I don't know how you could hate Marmite. It's so good. Every time someone tells me they don't like it, it's because they put too much on it.
Now, I've got a question for you. You're obviously both very talented in your family. One of you is doing slopestyle and one of you is doing halfpipe. Did you just pull things out of a cup to decide who was going to do what?
I actually followed Isabel at first into slopestyle. I mean, we started doing freestyle in general, so we were doing everything. We were doing moguls, aerials, slopestyle, and halfpipe. And I mean, I kind of just happened to be better at halfpipe skiing, and it was definitely a lot less scary for me, so I preferred it. And then when you start training more because you like it more, and then you get better. And now I'm specialized in halfpipe, and it's cool that we get to do different disciplines.
I was just going to say, it is good that we compete in separate events because we are both very competitive in nature, and I think it would probably not be good for our relationship if we had to compete against each other.
Megan, quick question for you then. Will you be watching the Olympics when they're on? And if you are, what's top of your list to watch?
Oh, of course I will. I got absolutely hooked on the Summer Olympics, so I can only imagine what I'm going to be like when the winter ones are around. I'm really excited about the Ski Big Air this year. I mean, it's the first time that it's been included in the competition, so it's going to be amazing to watch that. And, you're just talking to Izzy and Zoe, and we finally get to see them doing doing what they're great at. So it's going to be really, really, really interesting, that one. And also the ski and snowboard cross. I absolutely love watching that every year, every Olympics, just because it's such a fun event.
Yeah, that's definitely my favourite as well, and my kids really enjoy that one. Henry, what about yourself? What will you be looking out for at the Winter Olympics?
An alpine racer by my origins of skiing. I'll definitely be watching the alpine events, slalom, giant slalom, super G, downhill, and the combined events. And all my 3 kids are in the Club de Sport and Val d'Isère, and really keen on that. But as you and Megan pointed out, I love watching the skier board cross, and all the other ski events as well, the big air. But I have to say, a bit embarrassing. I love watching the figure skating. I think they're amazing. The
Right. Stuff
they pull off under such huge pressure is to me phenomenal.
So I did see there's a business called Grace Note, I think, who look at current performances and predict how many medals each country will get. And I think they said Team GB are predicted to get 3 medals. And that's across everything. Now, I thought that was quite low. I think it'll be more than that, because I think the skiers and snowboarders could get that, if not more, on their own. But we'll be following the Beijing beat more closely as we get nearer to the games. Right, we'll move on to towards the close of the end of the podcast just now. I noticed, I had a little look, I see we've got 84 ratings on iTunes, Apple Podcasts just now, with an average score of 4.7. If you think 4.7 sounds a bit low and you think we deserve a 5-star, how about giving us another review? That would be really helpful, and it does help other people find us. Also, reviews since our last episode. Leon Butler, well, I think he must have been at the Birmingham show, because his comment says it was cool to see the ski podcast live. Someone called Al Morgan on LinkedIn said a superb episode of the ski podcast, but I think he might be biased. Tim Boys on Facebook said, I only managed a few hours Saturday morning. He's talking about the Birmingham show, but I was really impressed, especially the speaker lineup, which I can only assume he means us at the ski podcast. Someone called Sofa to Slopes on Instagram said, fab morning of endurance training while listening to the ski podcast. So I'm glad we're keeping you going through your training there. Don't forget, you can always buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/ski podcast. All cuppers are much appreciated. This episode, I'd like to thank Kimberly Kay and Mike Greenland. And Mike Greenland actually said, love the podcast. I've skied at least twice a year ever since 1970. I started on wooden skis and lace-up leather boots. Things have changed. Missed my first season this year due to COVID, but hope to keep the calendar annual record going as I'm off in December. So enjoy your holiday in December, Mike, and thanks very much for the coffee. And now I do really enjoy reading all feedback about the show. So please do email me, theskipodcast@gmail.com. We also have a few stickers left. I just sent out some out to Austria this week that I can see the pile is diminished, but we have some. So if you'd like some for your skis, board, helmet or phone, just drop us an email and with your address. But for now, I'd like to thank Switzerland Tourism for sponsoring the show and thank my guest today. Henry, thank you for joining us.
Thanks very much, Iain. It's really been a pleasure to be here, and an honor as well.
And thank you, Megan, for joining us. Enjoy your skiing later this month.
Thank you. Oh, I will try. I feel like everyone else, I'll definitely be appreciating it a lot more than normal this year.
That's great. And finally, I'd like to thank you, listener, for sharing your time with us. Until next time, goodbye.